Welcome to the Collage Podcast, a production of Feed My Sheep. Feed My Sheep is a nonprofit in Temple, Texas that has a goal of feeding people that are hungry physically, spiritually, and emotionally. In this podcast, we discuss Scripture, and our hope is that you would be fed spiritually through the reading and discussing of His Word. We're glad you're here.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Wanderers podcast. Jeff is laughing because I always start out every episode with a big clap. It helps with the audio, but it's why we always giggle. It's a fun time. But today we are reading about Jesus healing a paralyzed man. I'm going to read from Luke, and then we're also reading from
Mark 2. I can read that one.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And Karen's going to read it. I'll start with Luke. We're going to read from chapter 5, verses 17 through 26. They read this way. One day Jesus was teaching, and Pharisees and teachers of the law were sitting there. And they had come from every village of Galilee and from Judea and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was with Jesus to heal the sick. Some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a mat, and they tried to take him into the house to lay him before Jesus. And when they could not find a way to do this because of the crowd, they went up on the roof, and they lowered him in on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, "Who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And Jesus knew what they were thinking, and he asked, "Why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." And so he said to the paralyzed man, "I tell you, get up and take your mat and go home." And immediately he stood up in front of them, took what he'd been lying on, went home praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, "We have seen remarkable things today."
Okay, in Mark 2, we'll be beginning in verse 1. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home, and they gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get in to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts, and he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and take your mat and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home." And he got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this."
You both looked to me.
So I think my initial wonder was, what was it like to be paralyzed in the first century? I mean, that alone today is feels insurmountable. I mean, it feels like a really difficult thing to go through life. And we have things like ADA compliance and wheelchairs and motorized things and
hospitals.
Yes, right. Pain medicine. I mean, whatever it is, we have such modern medical care, and I can't imagine the vulnerability that is for somebody today, but especially back then, of relying on people that you knew to take care of you. In thinking through that perspective in the story, it was interesting to me because Jesus tells the man, "Go home," indicating that he had a home, which that thought was kind of surprising to me because I guess I pictured him as somebody that probably like lived at the pool of Bethesda or something like that and just constantly relied on begging. But then for Jesus to say, "Go home," I thought, oh, he has a home. And then when I researched further, there were some scholars that think it's possible these people that lowered him in, they could have been friends, but they also could have been his slaves or servants, which also changed it for me in thinking, wow, if they were slaves or servants, what does it say about this man's character that they heard about this healer and carried their master to go get healed? That could say a lot about him and their willingness to bring him. So I don't know. I had a lot of questions just about what his life looked like. And
I wonder too, as I envision this story, maybe, and I don't have any, scholarly evidence of this, but I just envision, a lot of times folks with ailments and injuries and that sort of thing in the ancient world are treated as outcasts and, like you said, beggars and that sort of thing. And so this is a man in that situation. Maybe Jesus is saying, go home because of his paralyzed nature, his family had kind of just been like, oh, he's destitute. We can't do anything for him. Or maybe it's, he's this way because of the sins of his mother. And if we were around him, like this and that, whatever. And so I envision maybe it's a group of ragtag beggars who are like, this guy's got the worst of it. Like we all have needs, we're all struggling. Maybe it's a blind guy who's carrying his paralyzed friend up on the roof, which sounds like an absolute disaster waiting to happen, or a guy with one arm or, that sort of thing. But they're like, he needs it the most. Is maybe just one way to look at it, that doesn't come with any sort of evidence. And I think it's one of those things we don't know, but just if these are his friends, the people who know him, who he spends his time with, there's a chance they could also be ragtag, lame people, yeah.
I think it's important to see in two separate things that Jesus did. I think, like you mentioned, a lot of them in the crowd could have been like, what did this man do? What was his sin that he was paralyzed? And, we know from other stories that Jesus says the man blind, it wasn't his fault. It's not because of sin that this happened. And I think that that's something that can still permeate even our culture today is, this honestly, karma is kind of what it's like. Well, what did he do? Or he must have done something to get this, or it's because he divorced his wife, or, whatever it could be. But blaming the physical ailment because of something spiritual, I think Jesus is very clear in other scenarios that is not how the kingdom works. And yet I see him sort of making that distinction here of like, I'm healing you physically, but I'm also going to forgive your sins. I see those as two different things, but this one is more eternal and you need this one. And I think he's showing really that was probably more for the Pharisees at that moment. I have to believe that somebody paralyzed and then getting healed would likely become a follower of Jesus through that. And then just I think his sins were going to be forgiven either way. And so I think Jesus acknowledging this was for the benefit of those in the room more than this man.
For me, like in it, it's a beautiful picture. I mean, and like this, I got an opportunity years ago, Guatemala. It was different, but I've never really, because I always read the story and kind of glance over the paralyzed man, because like I get the significance, and I do, like I often read a lot of stuff. Oh, he's dealing with a paralytic man. Oh, okay, cool, neat. No, it is like you said, we must understand the magnitude of what that would mean in that time, anywhere, even now, but even in that culture at that time, how big it was. And so for me, I'd never really grasped it. But in Guatemala, I was on a medical mission. I was not doing medical stuff, so lucky for everybody.
Not impersonating a doctor.
No, not at all. I was there, but kind of doing the praying with the families. Didn't speak very good Spanish at all. But all that to say, a mother came, and she was stereotypical Guatemalan mother size, pretty slight. They're not the biggest, hugest giant people. She's pretty small. And she had a son, and he was 26, 27 in my head, I remember. and he had been paralyzed from birth. And she was the only way to get him around. She did not have a wheelchair. She did not have anything. She carried this grown man everywhere. And if he did not weigh equal to her or more, I'll give you $1 million. So they were about the same size. He could not communicate well. So in this story, at this juncture, I cannot not in my head not go to that moment. He couldn't communicate well in ways that I could understand or anybody else. But the mom knew exactly what he was trying to convey. And so we get, and they were each other's life. I mean, obviously, this was his life 100%. He survives because the mother wanted him to survive. And so they had been in this relationship. She brings him because he was getting some dental work. Wasn't going to get unparalyzed. That was not the medical treatment. He was getting some dental work because his teeth were unbelievable. So he's there, and the mother had come from a village that she had to ride on a bus. It was about a 9-hour travel to get to where we were. She carries this young man to us, and they're in the waiting room. They don't know us. We have a very different ethnic look and feel and language of everything. She doesn't know us from anybody. She had heard that there might be healing and help here, and so she brings the child there. Okay, it's time for him to go back, and so they do normal dentistry stuff. On this one, they had to put him on a cart to wheel him back, and he starts, I'm talking, screaming because he's scared to death. He doesn't want to be away from his mother on this.
He's so vulnerable.
So vulnerable. Okay, and so then in it, I will die remembering this. Some reason she trusted me a little bit, and she whispered something to him. It didn't calm him down much, but she whispered something to him. I don't know what, but I thought she was conveying that we can trust them. And she showed me, and to where she grabbed my hand, she lifted up the back of his shirt and showed me where he liked to be rubbed on the back of his back, and it kept him calm. And she whispered these words to him. I don't know what it was, but I could mimic what she said. You know, mijo was one of them, like boy, that mijo. So rub on him. She put her hand, she pat like that, and then she gave me a look which said, I'm trusting you to do this. When I look at this story, but I'm going, they carried, like mine, they carried this person for a long way to get here just because she didn't do it. She benefited, let me see, zero.
Yeah.
And so she did this. And then out of that, I can't even imagine a paralyzed man who can't do anything. Okay, maybe you convey decent, hey, dude, you can't do anything. Trust us. We've never done this before, but we may drop you. We're going to put you through a roof, but it's going to be okay. He's going to be scared to death.
Yeah, imagine they drop him and he breaks his neck. He dies. I think we like, oh, how cool. They had a pulley system, and they're like, this is the most primitive situation you could have imagined. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that story. I resonate with that deeply.
No, it was like that one. And then what was cool on that one, we did nothing but clean, is I saw the two of them as we were leaving the hospital that night. She was at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come, and she's holding the grown man as if you would an infant inside her jacket, and she sees me, and she couldn't be smiling more and waving, and you're going, amazing. This, if you want to see a ministry, like that with clean teeth, Jesus brought a guy's life to a whole other place. And then what I love on this, what we talked about, is he said, that's easy.
Yeah.
That's easy. It's not easy, but he says, the forgiveness of sins, only one person can do that. And you're going, what in the world?
Yeah.
It'd have been a great enough miracle to go, this dude, he gets up and walks. And you're going, no, he said, out of this, no, I'm doing this. Okay, but I'm telling you, this is the hard thing I'm going to do, this forgiveness. And you're going, what an amazing, I'm like, I can't even imagine. So like this, I watched a young guy's teeth get cleaned. Mm-hmm. And I will carry that the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can't imagine watching people, whatever, that carried somebody in there, lowered him down, and then he comes out walking. Mm-hmm. To have seen that, you're going, wow. And then I do a disservice from the story because I can read this, and I'm not nearly as passionate in seeing it as I am when I go, man, I remember when I saw this. Yeah. The same thing occurred, even more so. And I'm going, why do I water it down?
You know, if I'm honest about that situation, if I put myself there, I think it's like when you envision putting yourself within the midst of a story, you like the temptation is sometimes like make yourself like the good guy, right? Or like the person being healed, or like that sort of thing. Maybe the Pharisee, it's at points. When I think about this story right now, today, I think of myself as the owner of the home that Jesus is in teaching.
Ticked at your roof.
And somebody's ripping over my freaking roof.
I know, right?
And I'm like think roofs are in your home today. The most expensive system within your home is your roof. Mm-hmm. And I imagine it probably wasn't too much different in the ancient world. And you see some people climb up on your roof and rip a hole open to drop some homeless dude on a mat.
He did have a home, though.
Oh, well, true. Okay.
Sorry.
Debatable on what is meant by home. This is an allegory, Karen. Some man, he's paralyzed. Yeah. And I'm like, that's my roof.
Yeah.
I don't care what you're doing.
I've always wondered if his friends, servants, whoever they were, did they stay after
and
to
fix
help?
the roof?
Right.
Patch it up?
You know?
Or like...
Did Jesus say that at the end? Like, hey, you guys should probably stick around. And
or if they didn't, though, imagine then you're like laying in bed at night looking up at that hole like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, like that would be an interesting scene.
Maybe you're so grateful to witness what happened that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But then, unfortunately, like if you go that slant a little bit, this crazy thing called human nature, they're generally not the most receptive and good beings, even when they see something great occur. If I've seen anything around here. So mine, I look at this story and I'm going, this is great. So it's packed. There's a whole bunch of people, probably some semblance of order, in that people are going, man, I've been here all day. Luckily, Aunt Susie is up next, and her bad foot is fixing to be healed. And so they have waited their proper time. It's not in it. This is just Jeff in his head picturing, in case it's not there. Then you've done this proper. Yeah. You're in the line. You're right there. And then all of a sudden, these dudes cut. You're at Six Flags. I'm fixing to get on the ride I've been waiting on forever. And then all of a sudden, these guys come in front, and they're like, oh, excuse me, they got this pass right here. Yeah. I'm not really all that excited how great a time they had on the ride. So I wonder, on this, could somebody have missed so much of what occurred going, dude, that should be us up there. That's ridiculous that person got healed because that's not their time. Yeah. So because human nature would go, you know, or what about, you know, there's not any saying it, but like somebody who's way in the back of the line going, and were they the only ones who tried to get through the roof? Right. And after that, did the crowd say, nobody's getting through here.
Or like you mentioned, were these some friends that had ailments too? And what would it have been like to have a broken arm carrying your friend and then have Jesus heal him, but not you, and just the complicated.
Something I think about that, though, is, and not to push back at all, but I don't see any place in Scripture, maybe I'm wrong, where someone comes to Jesus for healing and he denies it to them. you know. And I think there were healings that happened that were just not recorded.
Well, and even in Acts, you see, is it Peter that walks by and just a shadow heals him? That has always made me think, if that was Peter, what was it like with Jesus?
Yeah.
And we just don't have it
And
recorded.
yeah, there's no scenario of someone coming to Jesus and wholeheartedly saying, would you heal me? And him saying, not today.
Not today.
Yeah.
You can live a
I
little
healed
bit
this.
more.
I met my quota, you know, for the day, you know, that sort of thing. So, yeah, Karen, who are you in this story, or what are your thoughts around?
So I have a lot of empathy for the Pharisees. Normally I wouldn't say that, but my view on them has sort of drastically changed this last year in seminary and what we've learned about them. So of the teachers of the law for the Jews, there's three main groups: the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Essenes. So the Pharisees, in my opinion, are really complicated. The Sadducees thought the problem was the Jews not following the law in the temple, and they thought if they would have followed it, then we wouldn't be here where we are now, like in an occupied nation. And so Sadducees were all about the law in the temple. The Essenes thought the Sadducees were jerks, and they were pretty much sectarian, so they lived a lot. We have Essene camps that were sort of out in the wilderness, wanted kind of maybe early monkish, didn't want to be around the group, super fundamentalist, withdrew, and thought this is stereotypical, but most of them thought anyone that's not like us isn't really pure, and we're the holy ones living out here. And then the Pharisees thought that the Jews were where they are now because ordinary people weren't observing the law. So whereas the Sadducees thought it was in the temple, the Essenes thought, it was just about everything being impure. The Pharisees thought it was about everyday people. And so one of the things, one of my professors said, think of it like a democratic infiltration of Bible studies, like community Bible study or Bible study fellowship, not to out if you're listening and you're a part of those are good Bible studies. But it was I think what has changed my view on them is their motivation, where so often for much of my life, I have read them as these, we hear Pharisee and we immediately think hypocrite, like somebody that's following the law and they're just calling everybody out. And when I think about the way that my professors have kind of helped me see them, it's like, oh man, that's me. Always wanting to be in a Bible study or teach a Bible study to learn more so that my everyday life is holier and infiltrated with how can I become more pure and holy in my everyday living. And so when I think about their motivation, I really resonate with it, and I have a lot of sympathy. And then especially when I think about them coming into a situation, so we know they're here watching this, and it says in Luke that they had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. That's a lot of traveling to hear about this guy. And so it tells me that they were curious about him. But then I think obviously they missed it when he's saying forgiving sins. And I want to believe that they saw this healing and were like, wow. But then immediately filled with anger of wait, you are saying that you can forgive sins? That goes against everything we've ever, believed. And just this, such indignation, but born out of a desire to be holy and follow God, that I don't know that it was so, hypocritical like we think that it would have been, and thinking I'm better than you and you shouldn't do this, that it was just no, we as a people need to be holy.
Right.
And I can't believe you're doing this to us. This is not good for our people.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, a lot of depictions of, scripture through both interpretation and preaching, as well as video formats, often try to make the Pharisees look like the slimy lizard enemies of Jesus. I think of like old school, Bible videos where it's like the Pharisees talk like, "Oh yes, I'm a Pharisee,"
Right, right.
And it's like, like. But if you look at it, like Jesus sure did spend a lot of time with them, and I don't know that we're supposed to see this as their drastically juxtaposed enemies. I think the Pharisees were incredibly curious about Jesus, and we see it here that I just depict them on the front row, sitting crisscross applesauce in front of Jesus, like, and maybe their intentions are not necessarily skeptical or, looking to punish Jesus, at least not yet at this point. Maybe it's like a genuine curiosity about who he is, what he's teaching, that sort of thing.
It was interesting. One of the things we talked about in class was the leniency of the Pharisees, that of those three groups, they were the one that were the most lenient on the laws. And that has honestly taken me months to wrestle through with, and scriptures like this to see them in that light of, it would have been the Sadducees and the Essenes more that would have cared like about breaking the Sabbath and all of these little laws. And the Pharisees were actually ones that were far more open to the laws and stuff. One scholar I had read, I love her stuff, Amy Jill Levine. She's kind of a Jewish scholar, but has taught me a lot about just the Jews and their culture. She says it's a generous analogy, but she said, I kind of see the Pharisees as equivalent of like today, what we would see as Mother Teresa or Billy Graham. And she said to think that either would not be in a right relationship with God is preposterous. Like you would never look at Mother Teresa and say, she's a hypocrite. She doesn't know God at all. And so I'm like, wow, then what would it be like to see Mother Teresa in this story? If I saw her or Billy Graham, or somebody like that living this good and holy life, and it changes it for me, and it gives me a lot of empathy, and it really makes me feel like, oh man, if there's anybody in the story, not that I'm like Mother Teresa, but the
okay, tell us more.
Stop. Just the desire to, I want to do everything that I can to live for him. And it gives me such empathy for their motive of calling him out. And if somebody walked in this room right now and told me they were the son of God and could forgive my sins, I would be pretty skeptical.
Yeah, it's important to remember that Jesus would still be like a fringy person today, right? And his followers would be fringy and would be outside of the main line. And
I'd like to think that watching him heal a paralytic would change me, and yet I think deep down I'd be like, what magic art was that? Like, I don't know what just happened.
Dungeons and Dragons, like, what is this?
Yeah.
And for sure, like this, on the front side, they hadn't even, like when you look at it, who does this man think he is? So we see that question, and you go, that's them again. Look at how dare them say that? That's a valid question to ask, and I put tone to it, even like when I read it. Who does he think he is? And then how dare him say he couldn't forgive sins? How apt is that sentence? I think if anybody came in here and said, hey, here's what I'm going to do, I can forgive sins, I'm like, that dude is whack.
So I do think partly too, when I think about putting myself in their shoes, I have a lot of empathy and thinking that would be alarming to me for somebody to claim that. The flip side of that is if I'm the one in power, that is threatening.
Well, true.
Very threatening to not only my position if I'm a Pharisee in Jerusalem, in the Sanhedrin, to a local synagogue, or to our whole culture as a Jewish people under Roman occupation. Like, you just claim that, we're mad. Are your people going to revolt, and is Rome going to kill us? Like, there's so much going on of what I think I would feel of like, no, we're not going to cause a ruckus. Like, I need you to not claim this, because we cannot have a fracturing of our own people when Rome wants to, kill us all the time anyway, and just this present occupation. when I think about specifically all this story, and I think about all these different groups asking the question, who is Jesus? And I think the Pharisees want to know, who do you think you are, thinking that you can forgive sins? Like, in some sense, I do think they maybe the healing brought them in because they were curious, but then the accusation, that I can forgive sins, they're like, wait, are you saying that you're the Messiah? Like, is that what you're claiming? Are you claiming to be equal? I think the Herod, later in 9:9 heard about Jesus, and it said that some believed John had been raised from the dead, or that Elijah had appeared, or other prophets risen. And it says that he was curious and tried to see Jesus himself, which was interesting to me. That Herod, I kind of missed that until I was researching some of this, that Herod himself was pretty curious and wanted to meet with him. It didn't, to my knowledge and research, it didn't say that he actually did, but he was curious enough to say, who is this guy? Like, I'd like to meet with him and see. The chief priests in 22 later, in chapter 22, wanted to know if Jesus claimed to be the Messiah. I mean, they kind of cut to the chase and are just like,
Yeah.
are you claiming this? Pilate later wanted to know if he was trying to become the king of the Jews. And I see in all of these different perspectives, a lot of it is fear-based. I think initially there's curiosity of, who is this guy? Who does he say that he is? But I also see some fear, and that fear seems to escalate based on the amount of power that they had. They're all coming out of curiosity. Pilate and Herod might be the most fearful of
The implications of who he's claiming to be.
right, political uprising, what is going on. The teachers of the law would be that next. And I think a lot of these people in the crowds lacked as much fear and just had curiosity in who he was. But it was interesting to me to just think through all of their perspectives and how power can keep us sometimes fearful and unable to just be curious about God.
That's good. Talk about that.
Yeah.
What are the practical implications of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it was convicting to myself just to think through my life and where do I have power? In some ways, I don't think I have a lot, in that I'm a stay-at-home mom, just studying the Word. I don't work for anywhere. I don't work for a church. But in other ways, I do have power. I'm a white person. I am middle class. Like, I have a lot of privileges that other people don't. And so are there areas that even my power and privilege hinder me from coming to Jesus with just curiosity?
Yeah. That's good.
Out of the story, we can't not. We talked about some, but the friends who brought the guy here. I mean, they're pretty big in the story because they got this cool little sentence, like in Mark. It says, Jesus said, "Seeing their faith." Then
Yeah,
Jesus-
their faith. That's
their
super
faith.
important
The
to me.
faith
It
is
wasn't
super
just
important.
the guy. It
Yeah.
was
Because
And maybe he didn't believe. There's also an element of this. Maybe he wasn't willing to go.
agree.
Yeah.
So
He's paralyzed. He can't go anywhere. Like, if they're like, we're going to Jesus.
right.
You're going
What
through the roof.
agency does he have in that moment
Yeah.
to say
He
yes or
can't be
no?
like, no, and I'm going to run away.
Like we can't forget that in this. Like, so we can lose sight of that. And so that something occurred, and not just lowering, not just coming, because there's other people that did that. I wouldn't even say necessarily just lowering through the roof. That's not a whole lot of faith. That's just like impatience.
Yeah.
Okay. But it says, seeing their faith. So then something occurred that Jesus would go, these guys believe. And I love that because it's others, other stories that go, seeing their faith, then Jesus healed this guy. Because the guy, last time I checked, the paralyzed guy he could have a verbal voice possibly. He didn't have he ain't stopping them. If they want to take him to Jesus, he's going to Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're loading him up, and he's gone. And so you're going, okay, what did Jesus see that was so impressive that he was sitting there going, because of that, what they just did right there, I'm going to heal this guy. That was impressive.
I see a parallel in Jesus seeing these friends' faith and what I think was the Spirit moving in their lives to give them that gift of faith and to say, go do this. Like, today's your day. And the story that you mentioned earlier about the woman in Guatemala, when you were talking about her physically taking your hand and putting it on her son to comfort him, I thought, man, that is so much like Jesus.
Yeah.
To take our hand and say, this person, I need you to comfort, to be with. And I see that as kind of a way that the Spirit moved in these friends' life here. And I think Jesus recognized it,
Agreed.
and he's like, that
To me,
you followed, and that's what I want.
that's it. So coaching 101, we're not going to turn this into soccer, but like coaching, you go into a practice and you know what you'd love to teach. Like the theme for the day, and in your head, we're going to work on scoring or whatever. And you're just watching the whole practice, and things are going on, and things are great. And then all of a sudden, you know what you're hoping to see. You need to see somebody get it. And then all of a sudden you see it, and you stop everything. And you go, man, hold on, real quick. Fernando, tell me what you just did right there. That was magnificent. Well, I did this, and exactly. That's what we're learning today. Brilliant. Brilliant. Did everybody see that? He did exactly what we're hoping to do. That was great. I think this, not that but he saw a moment, and then in the midst of everything, he's like, oh my gosh, they get it. Bring your friends who can't come on their own to me. And like them, they have the friend, they had to be right there. The friend's going, hey, I know you don't know this guy, but trust me, he's good. He's good. He's good. And so he goes, whoa, hold on real quick. The miracles, that's easy. Getting 4 of y'all fools out there called human beings to actually understand what's going on and do something, that's what we're trying to find here.
There's a family that I know that decently close with, and a terrible thing happened within their family in the last couple months, and I can't really share, but I've watched people that love them come alongside them in a way that is almost abrasive, that's almost obnoxious, And I think that's what this situation is like, that this family has been paralyzed by what's happened to them, and the proximity with which their community has confronted them with faith and with love and with grace is abrasive. And it is a picking up and a dropping at the feet of Jesus, whether they want it or not. And I just think maybe he didn't want it, or maybe he didn't believe in it, But his friends were faithful enough and gritty enough to be abrasive and say, well, bud, this is what we're doing.
Yeah,
I love the culture thinking through. So I struggle a lot with caring too much about what other people think. It's just something I've always struggled with. And I think about the audacity of these friends to tear somebody's roof apart. I think I would be too kind, but to a fault. Like, ooh, let's not do that. Oh, sorry, we tried.
Could we try a window?
Right, we couldn't get in. We tried. Let's go home. But also, again, that when I think about these friends, I don't think they had the cultural clout to lose anything like the Pharisees and the teachers of the law did. If one of them had stood up and said, you are the Messiah, like, I think I'm tying these two together. You just healed, which is pretty darn miraculous, and now you're claiming to forgive his sins. Surely these things are tied together to who you really are, they would lose everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I think I think I have a lot of compassion for that. And I see, again, such grit in these friends, but how much easier it is for the friends that don't have power to come to Jesus. And it's convicting.
But then on the same side of that same coin, what if you have nothing and your only hope is that Jesus is who he says he is, and he turns out that he's not? Have you not lost even more?
Yeah, like, and especially if these are like slave class.
Sure.
You ripped a dude's roof open.
And even, like,
You know, like you're going to jail.
and this isn't all in. Like, this is everything. Like, they got this friend, and I can see that, like, this must be. And then could you, like, I would go on that, not the flip side of that, is people who lose power, they're going to get more power. They'll find it somewhere else. They ain't going to lost nothing. But what if the only thing that you believe that could change the world, and you have nothing, and everything is based upon that, and you bring your friend there, and it turns out that you were wrong? You have lost absolutely everything, even a reason to live anymore.
Yeah.
You've lost even more. You don't get that back. You know, and so I'd go, in it, the Pharisees, I'd go, do they gamble a lot? They may lose their job a little bit. And you go, that sucks. Yeah. It does. They may lose power. But at the end of the day, they still had a whole lot to fall back on, going, well, what we missed out, you know, this is kind of wrong. Our whole system of belief was wrong, but they're all right. They're going to still live in just a fine place and everything. If you had nothing and you like this, they all in. Either this is or it isn't. And they go, and then they even went so far, because at that one, where it's all in, is they go, I'm pretty sure I believe this.
Yeah.
It's getting to the house. I'm all in on this deal. Either it is or it isn't. You tear the roof off and you drop a paralyzed person down. Either this is or it isn't. And I'd go on it. Devastation. So I go back to poverty. Oh, well. So I go back to have nothing to eat anymore. Oh, well. So I go back and have nothing. Oh, well. So I go back. My friends can't walk still. Oh, well. Everything that I believed that could possibly change the world as I knew it was not real. That would have been devastation. These things that I have that are sins that eat me up, they can never be forgiven. That's not the case. Like, and they got rewarded, and Jesus said, you know what? And because I like on this, the other paralyzed men's story, you know, God at Bethsaida, he says, hey, why are you still paralyzed? He asked that guy. And the guy said, well, every time the water is stirred, somebody cuts in line in front of me and gets there. Jesus didn't ask, why are you still paralyzed? That's a whole other story. That's one of my favorites. Jesus said, you know, do you want to get well? Was then the question. And the guy's like, I can't. This one doesn't even ask any questions to the guy. Because you would think maybe there's a teaching moment there. There's a teaching moment at Bethsaida.
Yeah. Like even the healing is abrasive, and like the forgiveness of sins. You know, maybe Jesus knew his heart, and you know, we know he could, just like that with the Pharisees. Maybe he was feeling that way, but it's like Jesus just impressed upon him the healing. He didn't ask for it. It's like, you're healed.
Done. Yep. Agreed. And so I do like that. And then the story for me, it is magnificent, and like Karen said, it is not so ready. I hate it because I'm going to do the thing I despise. I'm going to use it metaphorically, and it is not a metaphor. Jesus healed a paralyzed man. Okay, but I'm like, I often find in my life I can become paralyzed in this whatever you put scenario here, and I find it, I am unable to move. That's a metaphor, terrible metaphor on this. I'm not watering, but I do know this, and I'm not going to go down, well, it's, okay, I know that there is times that things occur that I cannot do anything, and what I like out of this is, guess what? The guy did nothing for himself. He had a close group of people walk alongside with him and said, guess what? Like you just said, this is the faith. This is what we believe in. Guess what? I see where you are right now, but there is a place. I'm not the healing, but I can carry you to where it is.
Yeah.
And they do. You know, and so out of this story, the thing that is for me, the fact that Jesus healed the man, well, we know who Jesus is, or we're trying to learn more about him. It's not surprising. The fact that the Pharisees and Sadducees and all these people were there, not too surprising. The fact that these friends cared enough about this guy to carry him to where the healing is what I cannot escape from. That's our faith.
Yeah.
And that is the faith community. And for me, I would always come back to, because it ebbs and flows all different times in the course of a day. I'm a paralytic at certain moments, and then I'm a carrier at other moments, you know, and so you go, golly, it doesn't change. In our job is simply this, to be all in, to know that this is legit. It's worth carrying somebody to this.
Yeah. What if Jesus could fix this?
That's right.
What if Jesus could heal this?
Why would you not?
Yeah.
Why would you not?
Well, that's our invitation to you maybe this week, is to ask, what if Jesus could heal this? Or this person, this situation, this need, this friend? What if?
Be curious enough.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll gather with us next time.
The Collage Podcast is produced by Bobby Jeffers in association with Feed My Sheep. Hosts are Jeff Stiegel, Karen Smith, Jonah Fox, and myself, Roy Rhodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening. Or like, share, subscribe, and get in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you, so shoot us an email at digitalmedia@feedmysheeptemple.org. And may you be nourished for your journey with God.